Tonight I'm going to go over a flooring demonstration using vinyl and how to set up and start and finish that project, as well as all the tools that we would need to do this, and some different flooring varieties, which is a good place to start. So I'm going to jump in right there, and then if you guys have questions, feel free to ask those whenever it comes up, or I'll stop periodically to check in. So, okay, so we're going to start by just talking about some different flooring types. I'm not going to do anything with carpet because I don't know how to do carpet, so I'm not going to go there. And we have done a tile workshop in the past where we kind of went through more information specifically about tile. So I'm going to be looking at hardwood, laminate, and vinyl, and what are some of the pros and cons and differences, and hopefully navigate how to make that decision. And then I'll be working with the material vinyl tonight. So I'm just going to jump right in. I got a bunch of samples, which I would highly recommend. You can go into Home Depot or Lowe's or any flooring surplus kind of store and get a huge variety of samples. This is a great way to try to figure out like what your style design preference is. And they have a lot of floors now that are made to look like wood, even though they are not wood. And this is great because it's a lot cheaper. So I will start with just a basic hardwood floor, which is this little chunk right here. And if you can see, it's pretty thick. So hardwood is definitely the most durable and long lasting. I think this one is a lifetime warranty, which is great. It's also the most expensive. So this sample that I picked up is $349 a square foot, which is pretty expensive. And so to put this into like kind of a actual scale, for a 12 by 10 room, that's $418. So that's a pretty small bedroom. If you were going to do your whole house in this or a large space, it's going to add up really quick. But it's natural, it's durable, water resistant, super thick. So this stuff is going to last you, but it is a big investment. That being said, a lot of people cannot afford to do that for a large area like a living room or kitchen. So that's where some of these other laminate and vinyl products come in, because it's also got the durability and some of the same aesthetic look, but it's made out of composite materials, and so the cost is a lot cheaper. So the next one I'll show is laminate, which are both of these. So one is kind of this gray, grainy finish, and one is more of a wood-looking like finish. And if you can see, they're a little bit thinner, but still pretty thick. And these just have different layers in them. So there's usually some kind of backing layer that sits on the floor. Then there's this core layer, which is most of the substance of the block. And then some kind of finish layer that's a combination of the print of whatever the design is, and then some kind of top coat that's going to keep it safe. So for these two, there's also a really large variety in terms of cost and durability for low end and high end for both laminate and for vinyl. So this one is $279 per square foot. So you're saving almost $1 per square foot, but and this is also a lifetime warranty. So this one is $158 per square foot, also a lifetime warranty. This one's a little bit thinner, so maybe that's why the price difference, but both of these would be a great alternative to wood flooring. The other thing is all of these floorings kind of go together in a very similar way. If we can look at our wood flooring, we could see that there's a groove here and a tongue here. So these floor pieces are all going to fit together in a tongue and groove way. So a groove, and my tongue goes into that groove to interlock these pieces. That's the same throughout all of these. The laminate floor looks a little bit different, a smaller tongue and kind of a deeper groove, but they all install the same way. The only difference is with hardwood, you're going to be using nails to secure this to the floor. And a lot of the laminate and vinyl options, you don't need any kind of power tool. So that is something else to consider, is how many tools you're going to need to do this project yourself or do a repair down the line. So the laminate, these are great for like common areas in your house, living rooms, entryways, kitchens. One of the biggest pros over a vinyl flooring is how comfortable it is. So it is a little bit thicker, which this is just what I've heard, makes it feel more comfortable like under your foot. So that is something else to consider. It's often warmer than a vinyl because it's got this thicker layer, so it's not going to be as cold. So if it's an area that you're going to be walking around inside a lot, that's a good thing to consider with this. Okay, so next is we'll go into vinyl. So I have a few different pieces here. I'll start with this one. This is similar to the vinyl I'm going to be using tonight. It's a little bit thinner than our laminate. So laminate is here, vinyl is this one. It's a little bit thinner, but essentially the same concept, right? We have a backing layer here. We have a smaller, thinner layer for our core, and then same thing, a print and a finish layer on top. And this one is $298 per square foot, so about $350 for that same size room. So like I said, the price difference is a huge consideration, and you can go pretty cheap with vinyl, and also you can get pretty expensive with vinyl. One thing you want to look for in your vinyl flooring is if it's water resistant or waterproof, which most of them are, then it's a great option to use for a high moisture area, which would be kitchens, bathrooms, laundry rooms. And you can also install this over other floors. So this is sometimes called a floating floor, meaning we're not nailing it down like we would hardwood, and we're not gluing anything down. There are vinyls where you can glue it down, but a lot of them now are floating floors. So they're going to interlock together with that tongue and groove and just sit over top of an existing floor. So that's a really nice perk of vinyl. Vinyl is also super durable and has a long lifetime. This one's also a lifetime warranty. Yeah, so, oh yeah, I forgot I had these two. So this stuff is also vinyl. This is like sheet vinyl. So this is a super thin layer here, and this comes in a big roll. And this is, I don't know, it's got more of like a foamy feel. It's pretty soft. So this is something like, I'm sure you've seen this on a floor before, usually in kitchens and in kind of older homes, but it is super, super cheap. So I got two different ones here. Let's see. So this is my thicker one. So it's 95 mils, this one's 55. So this is almost twice as thick, but they're both super thin compared to all the other samples that we just looked at. This one is 99 cents a square foot. This one is 69 cents a square foot. So if you are like trying to do a quick flip or a temporary floor in your house until you save up for hardwood floors or something, this is, less than $100 to cover, a small bedroom size. And this one goes on a little bit different, no tongue and groove. It just comes in a sheet. So you basically get a roll that's long enough and then cut it to size. So if you need to cut around cabinets or doorways or anything. And then this one does get put down with adhesive. So you would just put adhesive on your floor, put this down, and you basically roll it to kind of squish all the adhesive around, get it nice and flat, get any bubbles out. But this is a super cheap and easy fix. And it's got all the same perks as our other vinyl. You know, it's durable, it's water resistant, but not the lifetime warranty. This is a 10-year warranty. So again, this would not be like your forever dream home choice, but if you are on a bit of a budget, that's a good option. Okay, so any questions on all the different varieties? I know it's kind of a lot of information, but basically there's a huge number of varieties, so you just need to figure out primarily aesthetic and budget are going to be the ways to kind of narrow down your options. And then if you are installing it or if somebody else is installing it, and you know, kind of the time and costs that would take. So if there's no questions on that, I'm going to keep rolling into starting to talk about the prep and tools that you would need. And for this, I will be using a vinyl flooring. This is the kind of got, it's kind of got that same as the sample I showed, but backing, core, and finish layer. And then for my tongue and groove on this one, this is my tongue side here. It's got a little lip and kind of a groove within the tongue. And then the opposite over here. So that's how these pieces are going to interlock together. It's super simple. So we'll get to that in just a few minutes. So I think I say this in probably every workshop, but the preparation before your project is by far the most important thing. So if I'm getting ready to lay down my vinyl flooring, yes, you can put it on top of some existing flooring, but that flooring needs to be in good condition and flat, right? So if I'm putting it down on OSB, like let's say this is my subfloor, this is my OSB, this is fine. This has some variety in it. It's not like a concrete, perfectly flat marble floor, but this is good condition. What I'm talking about is if we've got like super wet floor, or we've got big, you know, dips in our floor or big bumps in our floor, this vinyl, remember, it is pretty thin, so it's going to show all of those irregularities in the floor in your final product if we don't take care of it in our preparation. So this could look like a whole range of you know, issues that would come up, but if we have any dips in our floor or anything that's not leveler, you can get a floor leveler, which essentially just fills in all of our low spots. That's probably your easiest bet with that. If we are going over, let's say we have something that's two different heights, like we have 2 layers of OSB or plywood down on our floor, and in one area it's lower, in one area it's higher, I would go with the higher side and try to match it rather than removing flooring, because that can kind of get messy. So whatever your highest point is, if this was my flooring here and I needed to fur this up, I would put in another layer of OSB and then floor with my vinyl over top of all of that, right? If we have any big bumps, like let's say where 2 pieces of my OSB meet, at that seam it's raised and I can noticeably tell a bump, that might be something that you're going to sand down to get it nice and smooth, so we're not going to see any of that in our final layer, right? We're also going to be looking for any nails or screws. You are most definitely going to have this in whatever floor you're working on, right? So if you have Any nails that are popped up, screws, we need to go ahead and sink those down or pull them out. This is going to especially be common if you have just removed a floor. So if I just took up, you know, a layer of flooring, I'm going to have a ton of nails or screws or staples or whatever left down. If I just pulled out carpet, we're going to need to get all the staples that hold down the carpet padding into the floor. Those all have to come out before we can put this down. If I try to put pieces over this and have weird bumps and stuff sticking up, basically that's, the floor is going to be no good. It's going to start pulling apart seams. It's not going to be waterproof anymore. So we definitely want to make sure we're taking the time to do the necessary prep work. Okay. Let me see if I'm thinking anything else. Oh, well, one thing I could talk about. So in terms of if we want to take off our trim, like let's say we're in an existing room, we're putting down new flooring, there's already trim that's up against the wall. So if I have base molding or trim down, I would recommend, well, you have two options. One, you can pull all of this out and put your flooring down and then put your trim back on. So that's one option. Another option is to get a quarter round piece of trim, which I don't have any, but basically it's literally just like a quarter of a circle and it would go on top of this. It's kind of an additional layer of trim and it looks really nice. It kind of adds some dimension to your flooring, but basically something needs to be covering this gap against the wall. So if you take your trim off, then we could slide under and put the trim back down. That's super easy to do. Or quarter round, we would just install in afterwards. So that would also be something that you would want to figure out in your preparation phase, I guess. Okay.
If you were to take the like the base molding off, would you have to buy new ones? Like how are they adhered to the wall? And
yeah, that's a good question. So normally your base molding is going to be it's going to have some caulk in this edge here, and then it'll have some nails going in it. You can use a pry bar to gently pull this out, and you just have to be gentle, or like you can't just rip out a whole piece, but you could just start it. The nails that are going into it are pretty thin, so it pulls out really easy. The only problem you would run into is if you break a piece, you would have to replace it with something new. So that just depends on your preference, if you want to spend the time taking that out and putting it back in, or just getting a piece of quarter round and putting that on after. That way it's super easy. Then, you know, you save some time on the prep work. We can still lay our floor down the same as we would, and then it's one more step at the end, which isn't too bad. Okay, can you grab that box behind you? Thanks. Okay, so I'm going to start talking about tools that we would need to do this project. So the reason I picked vinyl flooring is because it's probably the easiest out of the three to put down. So whenever you're floor shopping, I would say you should always look at the way that they tell you to install it on the box, because that is how you get the warranty that the product is guaranteeing. If you don't follow the recommendations that they say to put it down, if this is a floating floor and let's say I'm like, oh, I'm going to use adhesive, then that voids any guarantee that the product is going to work because I didn't follow the directions. So on my box, it tells me the material or the tools that I need, and they have a really handy installation kit is what they call it. This kit has everything that we need in it to do this project. So I went ahead and just got that kit. You can buy all of these things individually if you already have some of them, or you just need one piece. It's cheaper to buy it as a whole kit. So I would recommend doing that. Then you have everything that the flooring is saying you need to do the job. You should be good to go, right? So in this kit, I have a tapping block, a mallet, a pull bar, and some spacers. And we're going to go through how to use all of these. So basically the tapping block and the floor puller, what do they call it? Yeah, puller. These are used for joining the pieces together, and you can use just your own block of wood, but I would recommend just going ahead and getting this one because it's already got the grooves in place that match up to the flooring. This is a really common error if we're not doing it right. And these are just going to make sure that all of our seams are really tight together and installed correctly. If the seams are not tight, then the floor is not waterproof. That's, bottom line. So we need to make sure that every seam is getting tight, and this is how you do it. And then we have this mallet, which is just basically a little bit softer than a hammer, so we're not going to damage the floor when we're using it. But this is also going to help us get our seams together, and we can use these on our blocks when we're installing. Okay, next are our spacers. So these spacers basically are meant to have two different sizes. One size is a 1/4 inch, one size is 1/2 inch. With vinyl flooring, we need a 1/4 inch gap for in between the wall and the flooring. So when I'm putting down the floor, I need a 1/4 inch on the long edge and on the short edge. This is what the product recommends, so this is what we're gonna do. As far as I understand, this is because the floor needs room to expand and contract with different temperatures, since it is a floating floor, right? There's nothing that's securing this together, so it is gonna, kind of move slightly. This gap is just gonna make sure that there's no problems when that is happening. So, and then since we have a 1/4 inch gap, that's why we would need some kind of trim to cover that up or to put our base molding back on the wall afterwards. You would use the 1/2 inch for vinyl, so these spacers could be used for either flooring. I believe all the tools can as well. Like I said in the intro, it's kind of all the same concept. So once you get the setup, you could do, your whole house with this kind of flooring, and you only needed to spend, I think this kit was $30 to get all of these things. That's all you would need. You can use them as many times as you want. So that's a really good investment. Okay. So now I'm going to start, I guess, a little demo on how to do the floor. Last thing, I swear, before we do the demo is we need to kind of plan out our room size and how our floor is going to fit into that room. It doesn't seem like a huge deal, but basically we want to make sure we're not ending up with really small pieces anywhere. So I should never have a piece that's less than 2 inches. Ideally, I would want a piece that's about half of this. So if I space out my floor and I get to the end of my other wall and I have a piece that's 1/2 inch big, it's impossible to cut. It doesn't really install well. So we want to avoid that before we've gotten to the whole other side of the room. So we can basically do a quick measurement, measure how many feet across, and then convert that to inches, and then how thick my piece of flooring is. And so I could calculate how many I would need, how many rows of flooring. So if that's like 10.5 rows of flooring, great. I know that I have 10 full rows and I have a 1/2 row. If that's like 10.05, no good. So in that case, I would just cut down my first row. So I would have a partial row on my front end, then 9 full ones, I already have a half. I'll have a little bit more than a half at my other end. So that is the way to go. And that's not going to change anything. Everything will still install the same way. You just have to think about it ahead of time. Same way if we're going lengthwise. When I measured this one out, it was 2.57 pieces. So I have a little bit over half of a length here, which is perfect. If it was like 2.1, I would want to cut back my first piece and then go ahead with my installation. So, okay, can you see this whole area? I might need it back up for me to totally be in the front. All right. So this is my first row. Obviously, I'm not in a whole room. I'm working from just this corner here to the wall so I can show you guys how to make cuts and do the staggers. You always want to start in your left top corner. So if I have a box like this, I want to start my top left corner. The reason for that is my pieces of flooring have 2 tongue sides. So this one long end is going to be a tongue, one short end is going to be a tongue, and then I have 2 groove ends. So one long groove and then one short groove at the top. So I want my grooves facing out, so my next tongue will go into that. So if you start in your top left corner, I have groove, groove. That's the pattern I need so that all of my following pieces will attach into that. So once I have this one set, I already figured out it's fine for me to start with a whole piece. If I needed to adjust, I would cut it and slide back. And then you always want to go full pieces until you're at the end of the row and then make a cut. If I do a cut in the middle of my row, like this piece is cut, well, I don't have a tongue or a groove on this side, so I can't attach this to any other piece. Now this isn't totally scrapped, this can go on an end, but it can't go in the middle of a row. So I got my full piece. I'm gonna go ahead and keep running with my next full pieces. Zoom in on this one so you can see. So basically I'm angling my tongue into my groove to fit in, and I think it helps when you come from an raised angle, and I'm going down, and I could see I'm pretty well lined up, but I could go down a little bit. So gently tapping on that with my mallet to close any gaps, and that looks pretty good. And so now if I can see on this edge, I'm not totally lined up, so I can use my tapping block here, and these notches in it are going to match up with my floor, a couple taps, and now I'm even there. And that's essentially how you install a piece just running end to end. The ones with 2 are a little bit harder, but and for our first row, everything's kind of moving a lot. So if it's not perfect, it's not the end of the world because we still have a whole floor. And the more rows we get in, the easier it is to have everything held together. But I would just keep going like this as planned. Go ahead and install my next one. And now, since I'm at the end of my wall, I'm going to put 2 spacers in down here. I'm using my 1/4 inch, so that just goes in as so. And I would also need to do the same thing going in my wall like this. And so I would say 2 spacers per piece is probably good. And if we needed to take these to the wall, to get them to stay in place than we would. And I can see my wall is not totally straight here, which is
Yeah, whoa.
super common. So if this were the case, if I knew I really didn't have a straight wall, I would probably forego the spacers if I needed to and just kind of split the difference, find an area that, you know, I don't want to be totally tight down here and have a huge gap down here. So I would kind of split that. So I had about the same running across. And then again, that's going to get covered with trim. As long as we have some space, that's good. If it's a little bit more, a little bit less, that's okay. But we don't want to be totally tight. Okay, so now I got my first row in. So one thing that we can do is use scrap pieces from one end to start your next row. So this will help you cut down on waste. Tracy, we may need to do a video switch really quick.
Okay, let me know.
Yeah, I'm calling in from my phone.
Should I close this one?
Yeah.
Oh.
All right, are we back?
You're back.
Okay, great. Don't mind us over here. Okay, so we can use our scrap pieces from the last row. Remember, this is a cut edge here, but that's great for butting up against the wall. And I can go ahead and put my piece in like this. So I don't know if you guys can tell, this is kind of raised up off the floor here.
It's like the exact color of the carpet.
Oh, God, I didn't even think of that. So if it's raised up, that means I'm not totally in my seam. Great. So now that piece is in, and I'm back to a full piece here, which this one is our first piece that has two different grooves, right? So I need to be getting into both of those. And I don't want to talk about. So something else that we want to be doing as we go along is staggering our seams. So this is where my first break in my pieces. I have a full piece and another full piece. So I don't want another seam falling on this same line. My rule of thumb is at least 6 inches away from that. So I started with a super short piece over here, which is great because my next full piece will get me well past my last seam, which is back here. And then another full piece, I'll be off. And you can follow a pattern if you want. I normally just do it kind of random and try to use whatever scrap I have. But you could come up with a system if you wanted to. Okay, so now I'm going to be putting both of these. These ones are a little bit trickier because you have 2 seams to go into. And so normally I start on my short one and then work my way down the row. And if I'm started, then that's pretty good. And then I have all these tools that will help me get everything else put together. Okay. So I got my pieces in, and I'm going to use my tapping block to try to close this gap. And then I would want to work my way down. So it always helps to kind of go up at an angle too. I'm pretty tight down here, and this is, yeah, it's okay. Michaela's pointing out that my other small pieces coming out, which is pretty common because this is my first, I'm trying to join into a row that's not really stable. So it just kind of bounces for the first little bit. Jeez. One other thing you can do is use some kind of a weight that will help hold a piece down. Okay. So this is pretty good. Also, another thing is I'm going against a non-existent edge over here. If you have a wall, which I'll show you by the time we get down here, but this bar I could also use to help pull me into my piece like this. Which kind of works. That helped me close that gap up. Great. So that's all we're looking to do. Good. Okay. At this point, we're just going to keep running with another full sheet. And then I will show you guys how to cut a piece. You see my whole wall move. Yeah, once you kind of get into a rhythm with this stuff, it'll go a lot smoother. Already getting better. Here we go. Okay. So now I'm up against my wall, and what I need is a piece to go in here. Now I can get out a tape measure and measure it. There's also another fun trick to do, which is if I take a piece of existing flooring, I'm going to flip it around and mark the piece that I need. So basically when we're doing this, we need to make sure that we have the correct end. So if I have groove and groove and I need this tongue side, what I can do is flip it around like this. And I'm still going to hold it off the wall a 1/4 inch, right? 1/4 inch for my spacers. And then I'm going to mark this right here where it's going to meet the other piece of the flooring, right here. And as a double check, if I flip this back around, it's a very visual thing, at least for me. So if I flip this around, this is a piece I'm keeping, this is the side I'm getting rid of, and I can double check. I have 2 tongues that will go in and 1 groove for my next row, so I'm good to go. And this flooring is, this flooring is really easy to cut, which is one of the benefits of vinyl versus hardwood or some of the thicker laminates. I don't actually need any power tools to do this necessarily. So your primary cut is going to be what's called cutting to length, right? I'm cutting a length off of a board to go in. And so I have my mark here. I'm just going to be using a regular razor knife box cutter. This is how they recommend cutting it also. This isn't a trick or anything. Then I'm going to be taking a speed square, putting that up against an edge. I'm going to make sure that my this lip of the square is pushed up all the way tight, That's how I know that this line is going to be straight. Then I'm going to run my razor knife through. Make sure you're not cutting over top of flooring that you just put in, because when you run off with your knife, it's going to break, or it's going to damage your floor. Okay, so now I have one line going through it. I'm going to use this block just to hold it down and help me get some leverage, and I'm going to snap it. And that's that.
Wow.
So that is how I would go ahead and cut these pieces. Most of the time they come out pretty good. And if it's not perfect, that's okay, because this is our cut edge that's going into the wall, but that's a clean break. That's what we want to see. The only time this doesn't really work is if you were cutting a really small piece. So let's say I cut this one too big and I needed to cut off just a tiny little sliver. That's not really going to work. So I would need to cut a new piece, or that's when a power tool would come in handy. I could just cut it with a skill saw or a chop saw and yeah, that trim it. But basically there's no really room to leverage really small pieces. So best to avoid that. Hopefully I didn't just cut it too big. This could be a good time to try out our pull bar. Let's see. All right, and the pull bar works like this. I'm basically latching it on to the end of my flooring, and I'm going to tap it. That's pretty good. Close this gap. All right, not bad. And so I can still see like some of these gaps aren't totally tight. And what I would do in this situation is just keep going out with my rows. And then as I get more weight to the floor, and then I'll be sitting on the floor, I can come back with my pull bar and close any small gaps. Basically, we don't want anything glaring really bad at this point. But if everything's going pretty smooth, then we would just keep going. And then I can take my scrap piece and start again on the next row. So I'm going to do a few more pieces, and if anybody has questions, it would be a great time to kind of chime in with anything. One thing I've mentioned earlier, but if we're going to be ripping means cutting lengthwise. That one I would recommend getting some kind of power tool to cut that. Same way as when we're snapping, like if it's a really short piece, I don't really have good leverage trying to break this in half. And it's kind of hard to get a clean line running all the way down. So your options for this would be a circular saw, which would just be like this, right? Any circular saw, a regular wood blade will cut this, no problem. Your other options would be a table saw, which I would not buy one for this project, but if you already had one, you could use it. Or a jigsaw is another good option to just cut these pretty easily. You can also do it with a handsaw, I've heard. I've never done it that way, but it's just a little bit more time and labor intensive. But if you wanted to go no power tools, that's a great option. You can always rent power tools from either Tacoma Tool Library or some hardware stores like Lowe's or Home Depot. You could rent a saw for an afternoon or morning and do this project. So now I'm gonna go ahead in with my next piece. And I would just keep continuing this process for my whole floor. want to talk about. Find my other section of notes here. I had a list of some common mistakes that people made while doing, here we go, while doing this project. One thing that I hadn't talked about yet is these planks, they are meant to look random, but they do come in patterns. So I think I talked about this in the tile workshop too, but they come with like 5 or 6 different patterns. And so if you have a whole bunch of boxes, it's a good idea to sort them by pattern and then go ahead and mix while you're putting down the floor. So if I'm looking at this floor that I just put down, this piece and this piece are the same pattern, right? I have this groove running here, this here, this is a different board. So if I had like 3 or 4 of these in a row, that might look kind of like weird when you get the whole floor down, but if we mix them up as we go, it would be a lot less obvious. It would look more like a wood floor than a fake floor. So that is a little tip there. Okay, so the most common mistakes that I've seen and heard are nails and screws sticking up out of the floor, right? So we talked about that, but if I miss something and find it later, I'm gonna feel that underneath my floor. It could cause this piece to come out, and the flooring is not hard to take out and redo. So if I cut this at this point, here, let me just do a demo. I don't know if I've shown you how to take it out, but if this is my piece that's in, to take it out, I literally just lift it up and pull it out. So if you find a mistake as you're going, or you get to an end that has a really small piece, just go ahead and take them out and correct it rather than hope it be okay. And yeah, it probably won't. So nails and screws sticking up, not having a level or prepared floor, that's also going to come back to get you later. Okay, something else that I hadn't covered yet is how do you approach a doorway situation, which I would like to demo, or not demo. I can't do it here because I don't own this house, but we can talk about how we would do it. All right, so let's go over, see if any of our doorways do like that. See if we get that line. Okay, that's a little better. So, let's see, can you see me here? Okay, so if I was coming into this doorway, let's say I'm covering this whole room with my vinyl, and this side I'm gonna leave carpet or whatever. Basically, I would get some kind of saw. This one is a hand saw, which is great for making flush cuts, which is essentially like I'm flat and I need to cut something. We could also use some kind of multi-tool that would basically have this same thing, an oscillating blade that would go underneath this. And what I would try to do is figure out the height of my flooring, and then I would just cut this jamb, this piece of trim, this door jamb, cut this out enough that my flooring can slide underneath it. And once you cut it out, cutting it out is the hardest part. Then you don't have to make any kind of notch in the floor that looks like this because it's nearly impossible. So if you can cut it out just enough to slide this piece under, basically this much, ½ inch, ¼ inch under the doorway, then your piece it'll look like the door trim is sitting right on top of the floor, just like our other base molding or quarter round when we're finished. The other thing that you would need to figure out is your transition between 2 different flooring types. Unless you're doing this flooring in your entire house with no transitions, you're probably going to have a transition strip. And so that would look something like this piece over here on the floor, some kind of transition strip. Now they do make essentially the same thing as that, but in the matching the floor pattern. So I could buy a piece that looks just like this floor that I would install, and it would bridge the gap between this floor and whatever my existing floor is. And basically they have different styles of, or different transition strips depending on the flooring that you're transitioning to. So if I have like a thick tile down to a low vinyl flooring, they have one that's sloped. If you're going from this flooring to carpet, it looks a little bit different. But it all installs the same way. So basically it comes with a little U-shaped metal piece that gets screwed down into the floor. So this would go right in my doorway. Like usually I would do it right here, right in the center part of my doorway. That's where my metal strip goes down. Then my flooring, I would run all the way up to that strip. And then the transition strip fits into that U-shaped bracket that we installed to the floor. So I just snap that in place, and that's my transition. So it's super easy, and they have really good pictures to help you figure out kind of what piece you need depending on the flooring types. Does that make sense?
I have a question about the doorway thing. So would that mean that you would have to start with like a new piece right here? Because if you're coming a 1/4 inch away from the wall and then all of a sudden you need to go underneath, it seems like that might be kind of hard.
Yeah, you would have to notch it accordingly. Yeah, so if I wouldn't be able to make, if I was starting with the full piece here,
Mhm.
I couldn't make this piece bigger, right?
Right.
So I would need to cut down that row so that there was enough to go under the door, and then whatever was left was a 1/4 inch from the wall. So that would be my notch on this piece. And it really just depends on how you start in the room too, because your door could be in a different place. You could have a closet door and a bedroom door entry. Yeah, I know it's kind of hard to explain it without being able to visualize it, but yeah, I would need to cut this. So maybe I would cut like this, like cut a square out of it so that this piece slides under, and then this remaining part would butt into my wall. That make sense? Kind of. Okay, we'll take it. Any questions on transition strips, doorways? Just got a few more minutes left, so I'll wrap up by going through
Caitie, if you can hear me, you seem to be frozen.
No.
There you go.
Okay. Other common mistakes that we already talked about, but ending our row with a really small piece or not following the installation instructions. So if you follow all of those basic guidelines, you should have a pretty easy install. This is a great project to do by yourself or with 1 or 2 people. If you're doing a really big room, you can start working as a group and have somebody starting rows, somebody cutting and finishing rows, and you can really cover a lot of ground pretty fast. So I hope you guys have the courage to try someday at home.
I have another question.
Yeah.
Should you not do it on carpet like this, or could you do it on carpet?
I don't know. You definitely can't do it on like thick, really squishy carpet. Absolutely not. That's got to come out. This carpet is sitting on top of a concrete floor, and it's not very thick. So I would probably, you could probably get away with it. I would think if I was giving my best recommendation, I would say pull it out. But Basically, if you have carpet under your floor, just the more spongy it is, the more likely these grooves are going to come apart. The tongue and groove are going to come apart. So I have seen it done over carpet before, and it doesn't go well. It's like any piece of furniture that sits on it kind of warps the pieces because you have too much give in the floor. So best bet would be to take it out and go down on your concrete or subfloor OSB plywood. Yeah. Thanks, Michaela, for all the questions. If anybody else has questions, feel free to chime in. If not, that's basically the end of what I have. Thank you guys for coming tonight. It was super fun to do a new topic. We will be sending out, I think, the video recording in an email as well as a survey. So please give us some feedback, what you liked, what didn't work for you, any ideas for future topics, for workshops. We're always looking for new stuff to talk about. We have another workshop, I think September 23rd, which is going to be electrical. And then we'll be doing an intro to tools, I believe, October 7th. So
Yeah,
if you guys are interested.
All right. Karina, I will answer your question. Karina has a question about volunteering for Habitat. Everybody else has said thank you. And so thanks, Caitie and Michaela. Good job again, everyone. And we'll talk to you guys later. Karina, I will send you a message about that. Just because I think everybody else here knows how to do that. So I will send you an email about info on volunteering. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Bye. Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Tracy.